The Terminator is an absolute Arnold Schwarzenegger classic that was released in 1984. Probably the most classic with Arnold in it, even in comparison to like The Predator and Total Recall. I think the most known is certainly The Terminator, and I'm surprised I haven't talked about it yet. There's a few things that I can definitely mention right off the bat about this film. One, when I first watched the first two of the Terminator series, I didn't know anything about the story. So that was lucky for me, especially because I never watched any of them when I was a teenager. I watched them all in my 20s. I had not known certain things that are in the plot on either, so everything was a surprise to me, and I kind of watched this like a kid would in the 80s, which is kind of beneficial for me, I must say. I also will mention right off the bat that this will probably piss a lot of people off, but I still stand strong as of now that I love the first film more than the second film. I'm not somebody who thinks. I mean, it's a phenomenal sequel, don't get me wrong, but comparing one to two, I like the first better. Now, I still have to watch the second one. I have not yet. I'm going to be reviewing that as well. So maybe on this watch, I'll like it better and it'll be my favorite in the franchise, but the first one is a five-star film right here, and I think just every element about it is perfect. And although the sequel absolutely, without a doubt, goes bigger and badder and stronger in every way, I think this one has the most heart and this one has the most soul when it comes to a Terminator film. And I just really think it's perfect from beginning to end. Doesn't overstay its welcome. The pacing is absolutely perfect, and it's just great. It's a classic for a reason. So we open up this film in a very post-apocalyptic, very bleak 2029, which is kind of getting a little bit close to home. We're 5 years away from 2029 already, and the way AI is going currently and how fast and rapid everything is moving, little too close for comfort in my opinion. But it's LA 2029. It's made in 84, obviously, so way before 2029. And everything is just very depressing. I mean, the score in this film is awesome, and it's famous for its score, but the score has a depressing element to it. It's very, like, hopeless. And all the cinematography is hopeless, and I think the special effects in the future scenes in this film are very well done for the time. Obviously, there's a lot of, like, green screen and computer generated effects that are outdated, but when they were made, they were really ahead of their time, and they still hold up today, I think. Really, really well, too. But just the vibe of this film is really bleak and really dark and very, like, hopelessly depressing. And I've always gotten that about it. Like, I always have this little bit of an uncomfortableness watching this movie just because of how hopeless everything feels in it. But we start off right away where both guys are being sent back from the future. And by the way, this is a spoiler review, so I'm going to be spoiling a lot of things about this film, personal experiences of mine, that if you haven't watched the Terminator films, go watch them first, I beg of you, and then come back to the review. Only watch this review and my recommendation if you've seen these films already, because I'm going to be saying details about them that, like I said, I experienced for the first time, and I'm glad I experienced for the first time. So everything I'm talking about in this review is spoilers. Schwarzenegger comes back here, and so does Kyle Reese, played by Michael Biehn, if that's how you pronounce it, back here. Probably not pronouncing correctly, but they both come back, Michael Biehn being the hero and Arnold Schwarzenegger being the main villain. And they all look badass, but the way Arnold Schwarzenegger looks in this film is exceptional. And I mean, his strength and his first kill, like when he encounters those punks and they're at that lookout site or whatever, and he comes up and he's like, "Your clothes, give them to me," and nobody's taking this guy seriously. I mean, I don't know why, because he's built like a tank, so even if he wasn't a robot, you should still be scared of this dude who's just demanding your clothing. But the punks just, there's three of them and one of him, so they figure they could take him on. But this first kill where he literally puts his fist right through one of them, like butter. Like, it's literally lifts him up and there's like blood dripping to the floor, and then he just like throws him away like he's nothing. His first kill is already brutal, and you already see that humanity serves like no chance with this guy. If he can put his arm through a human like it's nothing, what weapons, what arsenal do we have to take on a machine like this? I mean, you already know it's a machine, but you don't know the caliber of machine until later on in the movie when he starts kind of breaking down in the skin and everything. But you already know that we're pretty much doomed. Like in real life, this would all be over in 24 hours because nothing's stopping this thing. And then we're introduced to Sarah Connor, one of the best final girls there is in a horror action movie, an 80s movie in general. A lot of people I've heard can consider this a slasher. I'm not in that territory. I wouldn't say this is a slasher. It's certainly an action slash horror movie, but I wouldn't put this in slasher territory. But I can't argue with anybody who does, because those who do consider this a slasher movie certainly have valid arguments to say why it would be, and they make sense, but I'm on the camp where this is a straight up action movie with horror elements into it. So Sarah Connor is working at this restaurant named Big Jeff's, and she's your typical waitress. She's just trying to get by. She's given a hard time by most people. I love the scene where the little kid puts ice cream in her freaking apron or whatever it was. I've never actually seen that happen in real life, but we all know annoying kids, and it's definitely believable that some kid would want to scoop ice cream and just randomly put it in a waitress's pocket. But I love how the guy's like, oh, we should tip the kid. Yeah, great going, kid. In the background, you can hardly hear it. I actually heard that line for the first time while watching this viewing. And then the waitress comes behind her and she's like, hey, just think about it this way. In 100 years, who's going to care? Which is a good piece of advice, but it's also a little dark and bleak because of the subject matter of this film. In like 40 years, who's going to care? Because everything is just going to be so fucking apocalyptic. And then the Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, starts to look in the phone book and go find every Sarah Connor listed so he can shoot every Sarah Connor down, because apparently they couldn't pinpoint the right Sarah Connor. Again, there's a lot of things that technology can do in this film but can't do in this film at the same time. So Schwarzenegger is left to the phone book to basically just take out every Sarah Connor just in case, so that he could get the right one. And Sarah Connor is seeing in the news reports and everything, one Sarah Connor's dying, and she's like, wow, that's a little too coincidental. And then a second one dies, and she's like, holy shit, now I'm fucking scared, kind of thing. And who wouldn't be? Like, Sarah Connors are dying all over the city, and your name is Sarah Connor, so it's like, literally, what do you do? I found it funny how one of the Sarah Connors who got shot, the first one, where he's like, Sarah Connor, says on the news she's 35 years old. Man, again, with 80s and 70s, how are people younger than how they look? Like, they say that Sarah Connor was 35 years old. Bitch, this woman looks like 46, 47. Like, the hair, the everything. She doesn't look like a 35-year-old woman. She doesn't look like she's a year older than I am. I'm not saying I look that young, but Jesus Christ. Like, she don't look 35. I'm just saying. One of Sarah Connor's, she was supposed to go on a date or something, but she decides to treat herself to a movie or something like that. I love her roommate, Ginger, who has a boyfriend named Matt, and then I love Matt's phone call where Sarah picks up and she's like, and Matt is like, first I'm gonna unbutton your clothes one by one and by each button, or some really sexy shit that he was thinking he was saying to Ginger. And then Sarah's like, who is this? And he's like, oh fuck. And as soon as Ginger comes on the line, he just continues with his banter and everything. But Ginger, the roommate, is so funny because she listens to music on her Walkman at all times. Like, I'm pretty sure she does in the shower too, but like every waking moment she has these headphones in her ears and she's listening to music, including while she's fucking Matt. So they're having sex on the bed and she's rocking out to music while he bangs her. It's really, really weird. I don't know if I'd put up with that with a female myself, but it's just funny how Ginger just listens to music literally all the time. I love Sarah Connor's pet iguana. A girl having a pet reptile in general is cool, but this iguana is huge, and I don't know if it fits Sarah Connor. Like, Sarah Connor, she's the shy, quiet girl, at least before she goes badass in this movie, but it's just cool to see her with a unique pet like that. So I took it down because I had to talk about Pugsley the iguana, because I find that a pretty neat characteristic of the movie. So, and then later on, this is when like the second or third Sarah Connor dies. This is where Sarah really starts freaking out, and she calls Ginger, but Ginger doesn't pick up because she has her headphones in her ears. And I love how the answering machine says, hey, you're talking to a machine, which is a really cool nod to the whole post-apocalyptic AI taking over theme of the movie. And she's freaking out. She's like, hey, I'm going to go to this nightclub. This other Sarah Connor died. I don't know what the hell to do. And she goes to the most 80s, like, cyberpunk kind of nightclub, retro place you can imagine. Like, I really would love to find a nightclub that is like that because it's just so screaming with 80s. Like no tomorrow, if they had like some club night where they played like that music and had that atmosphere, that's exactly the club I want to check out sometime. But called Tech Noir, by the way. It's a perfect name. Also, because the Terminator ended up coming to the target's house, Sarah Connor, the real Sarah Connor, but Sarah Connor's not home now. He ends up murdering Ginger, and because of that phone call, Sarah calling Ginger and her leaving the message, the Terminator finds out where Sarah Connor is. So he tracks her down at the nightclub, at the Tech Noir, and Reese does too. I don't really know how Reese is able to do what he does in this entire movie. Like, even when he gets his weapons and his guns, like, you see the Terminator going to the gun store and getting his weapons and shooting down the gun store guy, clerk. But with Michael Bihn's character as Kyle, he just kind of like ends up with the gun somehow. And how he's able to like track Sarah Connor, he doesn't seem to have any kind of like device, so he just shows up randomly, and it's kind of like half-ass explained away how he could find her. Like, she has to be at a certain point or something. I don't know. I didn't understand how Kyle could find her and everything, but he does. And then there's this amazing shootout at this Tech Noir nightclub, which I absolutely love, when Kyle is one-handing the shotgun and blasting the Terminator, and the Terminator's just going back, and Terminator goes out the window, and Kyle busts out the first famous line of this film, "Come with me if you want to live," because, of course, the first person to say that was Kyle. And he grabs her and he throws her in a car, and then there's this huge chase scene, and he gives her all the lore and explanation of the future and how he was sent back to protect her, and John Connor is her unborn son, and her unborn son is this massive leader in the future, and she, she's not supposed to know who the father is, although things are made very obvious that Kyle is the father. I think anybody watching this is kind of gonna put two and two together and be like, yeah, I'm pretty sure Kyle is the father, and for some reason is unknowing that he's the father, even though he admits later on in the film that he's been in love with Sarah Connor his entire life in the future because of a photo, by the way. Just because of a photo. He looks at this photo of Sarah Connor, and then because of that photo, and because of the way John, her son, had spoken about her, he fell in love with this woman and volunteered to come be her savior in the past, in 1984. But he couldn't put two and two together and figure out that he was going to be John's father. Or he knew all along and just didn't say anything, which is probably more the case, but hey, it is what it is. He explains that this new Terminator is Cyberdyne Model 101, which uses actual like living tissue and flesh and has like bad breath and blood and absolutely everything that humans do over a metal exoskeleton, which makes them extremely hard to spot in the future. And the previous model 600 or something had rubber skin and they were easy to spot, but when you have these Terminators that are walking around in literal human flesh, it's pretty terrifying stuff. Oh, one thing I gotta talk about before I forget. There's a scene, and I thought about this only this viewing, by the way. I didn't think about this any other time I've ever watched The Terminator. Would the Terminator flinch or blink when he's shooting somebody? There's a scene at the apartment while he's shooting Ginger, I think, where he's looking down on her, and every time he pulls the trigger, he blinks like that. Would a Terminator do that? I thought about that. Is that a movie mistake? Or is that something that they just didn't care about? Or because the 101s are so advanced, did they do that on purpose? James Cameron, was he aware of this, that Schwarzenegger's eyes were blinking? And was it supposed to be because the model is so human-like that, yeah, it would flinch at a gunshot? Or was it something that just wasn't thought about, and because Arnold Schwarzenegger is a human, not a Terminator, that, yeah, every time he was pulling the trigger, he would blink? I just thought it would be cooler if he was pulling the trigger and just didn't blink kind of thing, because that would be much more machine-like. However, because of the plot, like I said, I think it could be played into the story, because the 101s are so human-like, and their skin, like, they have bad breath and blood and everything. maybe they blink in gunshots as well. And then we have like scenes of the future again, like later on in the movie. They're usually dream sequences, but again, very bleak stuff. Like you have just little kids who are like filthy dirty. They're in these like ghetto like alleyways and they're eating porridge and just miserable, like miserable lives. One of them is watching a television that's broken and has a literal fire in it, and they're just staring at the TV as if they're watching some kind of regular TV program, but it's a broken TV on fire. It's just really fucked up stuff that when you think about it, it gets really bleak. For me, it did. Like, it just gets really, really freaking bleak. And then after this whole lore and stuff, they end up at a police station. Kyle Reese is taken under a psych evaluation, and they label him off as crazy because everything he's saying is not making any sense. And this is where Sarah Connor starts to, get skeptical herself. She's like, yeah, he sounded insane, so he probably is insane. And of course, you can't not laugh at the cop. In technical terms, he's a loon. The cops assure her that there's like 30 cops in the building and that shit'll be just, 100% safe, even though this maniac is hunting down Sarah Connors, and if I was in her position, I wouldn't feel safe anywhere. I would want my own weapon in my own hands. But, of course, the Terminator comes to the police station as he should, or as he would, I should say, and he looks at the guy at the front of the police station. He busts out his second favorite or famous line, "I'll be back," and then walks out. And then like 5 seconds later, he bursts into the police station with a car, and then we have pure 80s synth music while he's hunting everybody down in the cop station, just shooting down every cop, and then. Kyle Reese finds Sarah again and protects her, takes her out of the cop station while being chased down by this Terminator again. And then there's another amazing chase scene before they end up at a motel where they start to create pipe bombs and start to like gather weapons and attempt to prepare to handle the Terminator, even though, like I said, in a real life situation, probably would go a lot faster than it does in this film for the Terminator to terminate the main characters. But then we wouldn't get an awesome movie like this. So, there are things that are dated in this film for sure, especially the Terminator's makeup, like Arnold's makeup when he's starting to, his skin is, or flesh is ripping off, whatever you want to call it, and the eye and everything, you can definitely tell that a lot of scenes were animatronic and they switched back and forth between Arnold and like something they built, something that's like very robotic, so you can obviously tell the difference. And I wouldn't say it necessarily took me out of the film when that stuff would happen, but it was definitely 100% noticeable, and it is noticeable. Probably noticeable back then too. But now it's just like, yeah, it's without any CGI and everything being practical, it's 100%, obvious when you're looking at Arnold Schwarzenegger playing the Terminator and a head that they built to be the Terminator. But either way, it doesn't ruin the film or anything. And I love at the motel, they start talking about like Kyle Reese's lovers and stuff, and I guess he admits that he was a virgin because he says he's never been with a woman and everything. And I scratched my head at that one. I'm like, yeah, I understand that everything was apocalyptic and you're a soldier and your job is to survive, but like never, like, don't you want to repopulate or something? Like, to never, like, to be, I don't know, he looks like he's in his late 20s at least. Just to have no time for that, I'm like, I don't know. Or maybe he was just so in love with Sarah Connor that he just didn't want to be with any other woman until he had the opportunity to come back in time, which then again it doesn't explain how he didn't know he was John's father. Like, it's a very easy thing to put together, the fact that Kyle Reese is in love with Sarah, everything that's going on kind of points to one person being the father, which is Kyle. But he admits that he hasn't been with a woman, and then he admits his love for Sarah, and then he gets all pissed off. I don't understand why characters do this. They admit their love, and then they like regret it, and then they go all macho, like, "Ugh, I shouldn't have said that. Ugh, I'm tough, I gotta make my bombs." It's like, dude, relax. It's okay to tell the chick that you want to fuck her. It's all good. And then, of course, they do have sex, and obviously conceive John. And you have the whole climax at the warehouse, which again is great. Kyle decides to like turn all the machines on so the Terminator can't detect them. I obviously like how at this point the Terminator is just metal now. All his flesh and skin is gone because of the truck explosion, which Kyle puts the bomb inside the pipe on the truck, and then the gas truck explodes and removes all the Terminator skin. But of course, he's still hot metal, and chases them down with the red eyes and everything. That door scene, again, very dated because you can tell it's a projection playing the Terminator, like coming up to them and they're closing the door on it, but you can tell it's a projector. Like I said, it doesn't ruin the film, it doesn't take me out of the film, it's just very noticeable, but it stands out like a sore thumb, but also kind of gives this film the charm too. And the press pushing down on the Terminator, and then Sarah being like, "You're terminated, fucker," and presses down. Like, see, there's a fight between Kyle and the Terminator that one thing that I question a lot is the fact that the first kill, like I talked about, he puts his arm directly through the dude and then throws the dude away. But in this scene, when he's pure skeleton or pure metal skeleton, he slaps Kyle, my bad, across the face, and Kyle just falls back like it's nothing. First of all, the Terminator could kill him in 2 seconds if he just puts his arm through him. And second of all, a slap would take his head off if he could put his arm like it's like nothing through a guy. A slap would like take his head right off his neck, I would think. And of course, Kyle is killed, but still, like, you think that the damage would be a lot more severe than Kyle just being like, ugh, and falling back. And you think the Terminator would be able to create a lot more havoc and terminate these two people a lot more efficiently than he did because of that one scene at the beginning. But like I said, we need action spectacle for a while. We don't need these films being 2 minutes long, being like, okay, they died, end of the world, credits. That wouldn't be too fun. And yeah, I just think this film, just everything about it, the ending too, with Sarah in the car and that little Spanish kid, the Mexican kid, and her talking to the recorder thing, the tape recorder, to leave messages for John and everything. It's cool. It's cool, and I don't know, like, realistically, her progression from being skeptical to believing everything necessarily. I mean, maybe that seems a little bit fast, but it goes with the film, and it's I guess forgivable is the wrong word because it's more than forgivable. It's understandable. It's easy to accept and easy to buy into, is basically the best way I can put it. And one thing I wanted to talk about too is, like I mentioned at the beginning of the review, I watched these films not knowing that Schwarzenegger was a villain in this one and a hero in the next one. And I'm not gonna talk about the second movie, but I thought he was a villain in the second movie. So when he ends up being the hero, I'm like, whoa, that, like, I wasn't spoiled for that, and I'm glad I wasn't spoiled for that. That's why I'm saying, anybody watching this review up to now, I'm sorry if I spoil it to you, but I warned you. All right. I watched this film, I watched the second one, and I was not expecting him to be the hero in the second one. So I'm sure a lot of audiences loved that in 1991 and liked that change, because I'm sure a lot of audience viewers wanted to see Arnold Schwarzenegger as a hero. And before I even watched this one, I didn't really even know that he was a villain in this one. I always knew he was a Terminator, but I always thought the Terminator was like an anti-hero kind of thing. Like, he kind of is rogue in a sense. I didn't think that he was actually the villain, like he was out to kill and was such a one target person or machine. But I'm really glad that I was surprised with all that. So, maybe not being allowed to watch these kind of movies as a kid because of my extremely conservative parents is a little bit beneficial, because that's one thing that I was not spoiled on, and that's one thing that I enjoyed experiencing with these two films for the first time. So I watched them, I don't remember when, but in my early 20s for sure. And I think that The Terminator is a perfect action film. So I love everything about it. And yes, as of now, that might change on my this viewing of Terminator 2, but as of now, this is a better film, in my opinion, than Terminator 2 Judgment Day. even though Terminator 2 is clearly bigger and badder in every way. This is the OG, and I love it. Subscribe to Morgan Film Fan if you like to listen to my voice or if you like my film reviews. I'll be back with more soon, so stay tuned for those. Check out what's on the channel already. Stay tuned for what's coming. Until next review, have a good one. Take care and cheers.